In today's tutorial, you're going to learn how to fill one object with a bunch of other objects using cloners and Cinema 4D dynamics. This is a technique I use all the time, so don't miss this one. Hey everybody, it's Nick here again from Greyscalegorilla.com, bringing you the tools, training, and tutorials to help make you a better motion designer. Now today's tutorial is all about dynamics and how to fill an object. We get into a lot of detail in this one, even some design. But before we get started, I wanted to make sure that you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, where we come out with new tutorials like this at least one per week. We even do a podcast every week, all designed to help make you go further in your motion design career. So if that's you, please consider subscribing. So today's tutorial is all about using Cinema 4D dynamics to put a bunch of small objects inside of a large object and using dynamics to make sure that none of them are touching. This is a really important skill to have if you use dynamics a lot. We even get into how to control the gradient and how to really get this look going. We even head into Photoshop at the end, where I show you some color correction skills to really make that final render shine. All right, with that, let's head on into today's tutorial.
It all started with these renders from Zeitgeist. I've been staring at their work for years now, and this is actually from a few years ago. I actually tried to make this a few years ago and really failed at it, and I think I finally found a way to do it, and we're going to go through how to fill an object like this, and then also work on how to texture it this way as well, which I think is really what the secret is for these types of renders. So there's this one. There's the sphere filled with spheres, obviously, a little chunk taken out, and then this one's really cool. It's the cubes here with the cubes, and of course the pills with the pills. These are all made with the same technique, or can be made, and we're going to start with the circle one just so we can get the technique together and kind of talk about some of the ways to start to build this, and then I'll show you another scene in where I made this one, the cube, and talk about some of the problems I ran into making this and how to try to overcome them. So let's head on into Cinema and start to build this thing. So obviously the first thing we need is a sphere to fill, and then let's make this shape. Let's make that bite out of the sphere here, and with that we're just going to use a cube, and we're going to move the cube up and out and forward to make that little bite mark out of it. And what we could do is just go to coordinates, and if we know our sphere is 100 radius and our cube is 200, then we could just offset this in X, right? We can offset this 100, and we know that that'll be exactly half. You can see we're cutting this sphere in half now. And if we do it on Y for 100, now it's moving up. And then the last thing we have to do is Z on 100, and actually Z went backwards, so we actually just want it forward 100. So let's go negative 100. And now we're taking an exact kind of bite chunk out of this sphere here with the cube. So to take the actual bite out of it, we need a boole object. You can see this up here, boole. And boole works like this. You take the boole and you say, I want A minus B. So you put those in order, and now you have the pieces that you want. You can make any shape you want. We're just trying to replicate this one. Let's get this one up and ready so we could A-B it and make sure we're doing it as well as we can. This is the kind of shape that we want, and now we have it. We can kind of angle our camera up here just to get ready. So now, how do we fill it full of other spheres? Well, let's make another sphere here and shrink this down so we can make little ones. And you want to get the ratio right if you want it to look similar. So there's pretty small here, pretty small ones. And we'll take that one, and then we'll take another one, and there's also some larger ones in the group. So we have kind of both scales set up. And we want to set those and put those in a cloner. So drop those into a cloner, and this is how you start to fill the objects. So in the cloner, you want to go to Object, you want to say, and also go to Object, so Mode Object, and then you want to drop the boole into your object here. So this will start to clone these spheres on top of this object here. You can see we have to change the mode. We don't want the clones to distribute on each vertex. We want to come in here and say, distribute in the volume. And now you can see they're popping inside of here. So if we just turn off our boole, you can see inside the actual object is where the clones are starting to show up. But we don't have enough clones. So we could scroll down here and we could say not 50, not 100, but maybe 1,000 of these, right? A lot of clones. We really want this to be full. And that second sphere might be a little bit too large. Let's shrink that down just so we could make it, smaller objects here. And we want to take the clone, and you can see it's starting to fill that object a little bit. We're missing a few parts, but this will all be solved when we start to add the dynamics, and it will start to fill this object. So let's set up the dynamics. If we hit render, you can see everything's touching, and this is the real big cool part of this is nothing's touching, right? And the easiest way to do this is to just set up all your objects, get them as close as possible into position where they should be, and then run dynamics for just a few frames to allow them to kind of separate from each other and then fall into position. So we're gonna do this with spheres right now, and then I'll show you how the cubes get a little bit more complicated afterwards. So let's set this up very quickly. Let's select our cloner, go to tags, simulation tags, go to rigid body, and this we have to tell to not make the whole system a rigid body, which this basically connects everything all together into one object. We want to tell this clone to put it on each individual sphere. The way we do that is we say inherit tag to children, apply tag to children, and then we say individual elements, top level. So that's just like the first level in here. So now if we hit play, which I guess now is as good a time to talk about this. Hitting play has been my biggest risk to date for locking up Cinema 4D. And if I look up over my computer and look at Chris, he's probably nodding his head going, yep, you always do that. You hit play, and then you're stuck because it's calculating frame by frame by frame, and there's no easy way to stop it. So I've developed a habit, mostly from Chris yelling at me, to fix it by using the key commands, the actual key commands, to move forward one frame and calculate one frame. So here's what I've been doing. I hit Shift F to go to the beginning, and then I hit G on my keyboard to calculate just one frame. This way, if you lock up your system, it's only locked up for one frame, and then after that one frame calculates, it will stop, and you can do whatever you want. It's not sitting there trying to calculate frame 2. And if you've run into this, you know how frustrating this could be because there's kind of no easy way out of it. And this has been saving me a lot, especially with the number of dynamics that we have. Okay, so this is rendering pretty quickly. We're going to step this up. You can see the big problem we have is they all just kind of explode out into space, but we want them to stay within the boole object. So let's go back to frame 1, and let's set up the boole object also with a collider body. So here's simulation collider body, and we do have to tell this to change its shape from automatic to static mesh, and this will allow it to exist inside the object. Okay, so now let's hit G, go move forward one frame, forward one frame, and now we have it, right? You can see it's calculating pretty quickly. We could add a lot more clones, actually. You can see our scale is still pretty large. These big ones there's too many of these big ones. There's quite a few of these middle-sized ones, but there's not enough of those little baby ones. So I love these little tiny ones. So let's add those. One way we could do that is start to randomize the size of our objects. But when you have such a large ratio between the large ones and the small ones, what I like to do is just grab another clone and make this one much, much smaller, maybe like 1, right? That looks a little small. 2 looks better. All right, jump back to frame 1. We're doing Shift F, and we're hitting G, 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 G. So now what? Well, now we have enough of those medium ones, enough of the small ones, but too many of these large ones. So how can you limit the amount of large ones? Well, what I was doing was basically just setting up the ratio inside of the cloner. So let me name these just so we know, like medium, and then we have large, and then we have tiny. Right? So we have 3 different versions. You can see tiny, medium, large. I want more of the tiny and medium ones and less of the large ones. So what we could do is duplicate the tiny and medium ones and put those in the object. So now when it iterates through this cloner, it's going to pick up a tiny one, a medium one, tiny one, medium one, and then a large one. So the ratio now is like 5 to 1. Or 1 out of 5 is a large, right? And this might be closer. So let's jump back. Shift F, G, 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 and we may have to add more clones now because we have much smaller ones. You can see it's not filling up. If we navigate around, our sphere's only half full. So this is the other thing you have to watch out for this is getting the right number of clones. So let's go ahead and add more clones. We go to our cloner, and instead of 1000, let's go to 1600. Shift F, playing forward, G, G, G. And you want them to, just fill up and no more. If you have too many, they're going to vibrate in there. They're going to jump around. And you can see a few of them escape, and that's okay. The final render actually has a few escaping, but I'm going to show you how to get rid of those if you don't want them, and how to add extra ones as well. So let's hit render. This looks a little bit better. I think those tiny ones are still a little too tiny. Let's try 3, and let's just see if they can move in place. Okay, cool. So let's, we could tweak everything forever, but I think this is looking pretty good. That's the general concept. So, okay, so now let's fill it up a little bit more, and I want to show you how to get rid of some if you don't want them. So let's go back. Let's try to explode this out into a lot of objects, and then we have some that kind of escape the world here. How do you get rid of those? Well, you can just paint them out basically using the MoGraph selection tool. And this is something I actually never played with. Chris also helped me figure this one out. It's like, how do you just kill clones that escape their world? This is the kind of the best way we found. And let me just show you how that works. So you go select your cloner, you grab your effector, and you get a plane effector. This plane effector, in the parameter, you don't want it to affect position, but you do want it to affect scale. And you want a uniform scale of -1. And this basically will just make that clone disappear. So now what do you do? Well, you select the cloner, you select MoGraph selection, and it's going to give you a brush, and it's going to have all the clones sitting here waiting for you to paint them with the brush. You can make the brush bigger and smaller, but you can just paint them out. So here we go. We're going to paint this one out, this one out. I'm going to hold down Shift so I can rotate and get other ones if we're missing any. There's one. And we're just painting out the ones we don't want. Now, when I did the cube one that you'll see later, there was a ton of these that exploded out because of the way the cubes aren't round, and they just kind of explode out a lot. So I had to paint out a lot more, but the concept is the same. So now we have a cloner, we have our MoGraph selection tag that we have to tell the plane effector to use. So we go to the plane effector, we go to effector selection, and we could say, hey, all we need you to do is look at those clones that we selected. And then we have to go forward a frame just to kind of refresh it, and they're gone, right? So now we have no extra ones. And if more show up, more show up. And if we recalculate the dynamics, other ones might pop out at different times. So just be aware of that. This may want to be one of your last steps. So because we've cleaned this up, let's start texturing this thing. Let's get our camera angle. Let's add a camera. And let's, set like a wide angle here. I know it's a wide angle because of the ratio between the large ones that are close to the camera and the smaller ones that are farther away. So they definitely put this wide angle lens. You could see the wide angle lens here as well. There's really a lot of angular distortion on this cube. You can see we're really close up on this, and we're really looking far away on this one. This one really shows off the wide angle camera. It's very, very the parallax, not the parallax, but the conversion lines you can see are very close. The things that are far away look much further away than the things that are close up. And so those are things you could look at to figure out what lens to use. So in this case, let's use a like 26 or 25, something really wide and fisheye, kind of maybe even like a 22. And that is kind of roughly the look right here. You can see these are large and these look smaller back here. Even though this and this are the same size, this and this are the same size, we're much closer to this one. Okay, so now what? Well, now we got to texture this thing, and I'll tell you what I did. I looked at this and I said, subsurface scattering. We need a ton of it. We need it to be beautiful. We need all this light to blend through. It looks real, it looks like candy, right? It looks like Jack has been saying in the studio since I've been working on this, looks like you could eat this stuff. It looks like you could reach in and grab it and take a bite out of it. And subsurface scattering really gives those things this look. The problem is I started playing with subsurface scattering, and the render times went crazy. They just shot up. Minutes and minutes and minutes per frame just for one still, and it was hard to work with. It was hard to set up. It was hard to get the look that I wanted, and you would get really close with subsurface, and you would change one thing, and all the colors would change, all the details would change, and it just didn't work out. And you can see we have a lot of like brightness over here and then darkness over here. We have some really nice shadows and stuff that subsurface scattering just gets tricky to handle that. So after playing with that for long enough, I remembered that Chris had this really cool Chanlum kind of technique, and I asked him how to set it up, and it ended up working really well for this. So I wanted to show you guys, and if I mess it up, maybe Chris will come do another tutorial to show you exactly how this is, but this is how I understand it. Let's make a new texture and set this up. Let's go to our luminance here and set up our Chanlum. So we go to texture, and we go to, I never remember where it is, effects Chanlum. All right, so that's our basic setup. We have it on all the clones. We need a light, right? So you need a light with Chanlum for sure, and you need shadows. So let's just give it basic soft shadows, and I pulled the light over to the side, and I hit render, and this is what I get. Basically a fake subsurface scattering, and you can see how fast that rendered. Now it's a little noisy. We could fix a lot of this stuff, but this renders so quickly, and it's just really, really great for what this is. If your subsurface fake is really this kind of super scattered, super bright look, you may want to try this Chanlum technique. So you can see, this is obviously a far away from where we need to be, but you can see all the nice little detail we have in here. Let's add another light over on the other side, but tone this one down a little bit. Hit render, and now we're getting this nice soft feel, right? Now we combine this with the colors, we combine this with other brightnesses, and it's going to go a long way. Actually, before we build everything else, I forgot to show you guys how to set up the colors. And so let's set up the color really quickly. And this works for all of these here. You have, this where the bite is taken out is a different color, and then it blends into another color. Again, same here. It's kind of green and kind of like reddish off-white in the middle, and it fades off. So how do you set this up? Well, in your cloner object, you want to set another MoGraph plane effector. And this plane effector is going to be your color fall off. So now go to the fall off. You want a spherical fall off in this case. In the cube one, I used a cube, and I'll show you the other scene file. I'll just stop talking about the cube one until we get to it. But we have our plane fall off, and we want the inside of this here, where this fall off is. We want everything inside the fall off to be yellow, and we want everything outside to transition to the pink, right? So we have our basic plane effector. Let's go to our parameter and say, I don't want you to mess with position. I don't want you to mess with anything. All I want you to do is set color and change the color, right? And now the only other thing you have to do is go to your cloner and go to transform and zero this color out to black, okay? So let's see what we have. When we hit render, we have to, let me just delete this this off of our don't delete the cloner, Nick. Oh, messed up. Got to recalculate. We may have a couple extra flyouts. That's okay. I meant to just delete the texture, and I deleted the whole clone. Okay, so now we're getting what we want. So the inside is, let me get rid of our lights. The inside is white, and the outside is black. Okay, so this is the first start. So let's get this ratio correct. It looks like I need to clamp a little bit closer on the inside. So we can go to our plane effector and kind of scale this fall off down a little bit. So now it's really only going to grab the inside ones. And I want to also warn you that if you're using instances, that this will mess up. This will mess up your colors quite a lot. So let's shrink the whole entire plane effector down a little bit. This is our first plane effector. Let's go to this one. and make sure that's on. And I want to scale the whole fall off scale down to make sure that these outside ones are still becoming black. And it looks like it's working pretty well. It's looking pretty good. All right, so we have the inside white, the outside black. So now how do we make those different colors? Well, now we come into our luminance and we use the Chanlum to get the color, and we have to use the color channel from this black and white to start colorizing it. So let me show you where that is. You come in here, and let's just wait on the Chanlum for now. I'm just going to replace this with luminance color shader. So now the luminance will be driven by the color shader. When you add the texture now to the cloner, it should work just like it used to, right? So now we have our inside white and our outside black, and this is actually driven through the luminance on the texture. So now to make it the colors that we want, we need to add a colorizer to it. And the way we do that is we can just add a colorizer right on top of this. So let's just grab color shader, colorizer, and now the colorizer automatically grabs yellow to black. If we open up our colorizer, it's going to say black, red, yellow. You can see that's what's happening here. Now I'm going to redo this. I'm getting some weird colors here on the outside. These should not be any different colors, and maybe it's just the way that this was built. So I'm just going to reset this a little bit. Oh, and I see it looks like it was actually set on birth. So we have to fix that, and we have to fix that at the end of the tutorial here, because I'm not quite sure why those are outside of there. Those should be the same. Looks like this was set on birth, and then the dynamics filled it in. One way I think we could fix this is the reason I think it's happening is because, see, the whole thing is not filling up the way it should. So I'm going to try something. This is on the fly. Hopefully I'm not going to break anything here. If you see a sudden jump in the tutorial, you'll know I really screwed up. But I try not to edit anything, but I do want to fix this for you. So let's see if this works. Here's the rule for everything. If you're having a weird problem like that, what do? You connect it. Connect object. So I'm going to put the boole in a connect object, try to make it one solid piece. So now what I want to do is tell the cloner to use the connect object instead of the boole, and hopefully now it's going to fill in. And oh my gosh, it works. The connect object always works. Thank you, connect object. You're my hero. So now I'm just going to move the dynamics tag up here and try this. So now let's refresh and start and start and start and start. And now it's working. Yes. Okay. So now we can scale our plane effector up. Man, I love when that works. I love messing up a little bit. All right, so there we go. And we're just going to set this yellow to red and fill it. And now we're talking. All right, sweet. So that worked really well. What do we do now? Still looks nothing like this final render. Let's go to our specular, turn that off, and let's look at the final renders, get our colors, right? So one thing we could do is just like color drop these colors. So like lemon head yellow and kind of sherbet pinky. Sherbet. What do you say? Sherbet or sherbet? Or sherbet? What do you say, Jack? Sherbet. Jack says sherbet is what Ernie says to his friend. Anyway, colorizer, let's change the colors. We want yellow in the middle, but I think it's more of like a pale, like less saturated. And then we want, on the outside, we want this kind of light pinkish. All right, boom, sweet. Render, still nothing like what we want. So now what's the issue? So now we have our general color, but we don't have all that Chanlum effect we were talking about. So how do we take the luminance of our colorizer and also add the Chanlum on top of it? Well, this is where you start to look into a layer of material that you can layer other materials on top of. So we have our main colorizer. On top of it, we're going to use the Chanlum. So let's add shader, effects, Chanlum, And let's just use the defaults right now. Let's turn off Gaussian and leave on shadows and set this to along normal. Now these are pretty similar effects, and I'm looking more into what makes this Chanlum thing work really well. But for now, let's just start with these and see what happens. Let's hit render. And, oh, we don't have our lights. Let's turn our lights back on. And now we're starting to get this kind of internally glowing object, right? And, you know, we have some sample issues. We can clean this up. But for now, let's add this to our colors. So the way we do that is we back one layer out. We take our Chanlum and we multiply it on top of our color. So now we're getting our Chanlum on top and our colorizer below it, and it is still, you can see, not very, you know, it's too shadowy. So what we could do is just tone this back down. We want that luminance to still be mostly bright, but to start to pick up these Chanlum effects, right? So what else can we do? Well, you can see the shadows. Let's turn off all the lights except for one, and I'll just turn this one all the way off. We have one light over here, and I'm going to turn up the Chanlum. I know we're jumping around a lot, but this technique is pretty crazy. I want you to see what all these little settings do. So first of all, let's clean up some of this grain. Let's go to our physical render, and I'm going to set this to automatic and set this up to like 50 and see if that cleans anything up. Definitely cleaned up a little bit of the grain. And I think the other way to clean some of this up is to actually go into our samples and just turn up the samples on our Chanlum. And you can see it renders a little bit longer, but it's cleaning up that effect quite a lot. So let's jump up one more time. You know, let's jump it back to 20 just for speed of rendering for a tutorial, and then know that we can always turn this back up. All right, so now where do we go from here? Well, we have our Chanlum effect. We have our lights, and we have the kind of shadowing going on. So let me just put this light kind of right in the bite area and see what we get. This is looking much better. This is all fading out, but we're going to add another light. Where do we go from here? How do we add more, kind of more of this glossiness that we get on this render? Well, one way we could do it is to just add another light over here, and also just tone this one down a little bit. And now we're starting to get lights from everywhere, starting to brighten that up, starting to get brighter and darker areas. But we also want to kind of manage the difference between our Chanlum and the pure brightness. So here's the pure brightness color, and then here's the Chanlum coming in. And if we tone that down, now we're getting more to where we want to be. So this Chanlum is basically adding more of that shadow detail in the center, in the areas that we want. Well, this is getting close, but there's a lot of glossiness on this. You can see there's like a reflection and a really kind of bright, glossy texture to it. And so what do we do for that? We add reflection. So we could add reflection, we could add a Fresnel shader, and just tone it way down. We don't need a lot of reflection, but a little bit will start to pick up its surrounding the surrounding kind of bits. And already it's looking a lot more glossy. It's picking up all this stuff, but there's nothing else to reflect. So you need something outside to reflect. You could add a sky object in here. That'll give you a general brightness. I always grab the HDR Studio rig and just turn all the floor stuff off. Just for this, I just need basically an HDR that surrounds it, that gives it a little bit of reflection and shadow. And now you're seeing that the glossiness is coming in. Way too much reflection, though, so let's tone that back. Way back. We just want to pick up a few of those kind of highlights. The other thing we could do is add our specular channel back in. So let's turn that on by default. And now you're seeing that glossiness is coming back in. That's actually not a bad spec. It's a little bright. So let's tone it down. And then it's a little sharp, so let's just kind of fatten that specular. And it's going to get this nice kind of shiny, glossy feel to it, almost like a blurry reflection. That's looking way better. So where do we go from here? Well, that pink is not the pink I want. So let's go into our colorizer and pick a much more pink. Less of a white pink. And that's too dark. So as always, when we get into the texturing and lighting section, we're tweaking 5-10% on everything and trying to get it look the way that we want. And there's just no other way around that. The ways that textures and lights and shadows and everything interact is what makes this turn from a pile of spheres into something that looks this good. Because we got to this point with gray spheres in like 10 minutes, right? But now we've spent the last double that trying to tweak all the textures and colors and get all this stuff going. And I guess it's obvious as I say it, but this is what turns a pile of spheres for me into something this beautiful, or a pile of cubes into something this nice. And tweaking and tweaking and tweaking this is what makes all the difference. So let me show you another little trick about this Chanlum effect. I'm going to crank up the Chanlum effect just so you guys could see the kind of see what it does. So check out the shadows. Check out the density of the shadows. I want you to look at like how sharp all the shadows are. And if we go into our light, we can actually go into our shadow layer and say, okay, let's make the shadow map really high. Let's set this to 1500 instead of 500. And you can see now we have much sharper shadows. It looks like a hard shadow. Conversely, if we set this to custom and we set this to like 100, we're going to get like super soft, like fuzzy shadows, right? We could use this to our advantage. If you want these to look softer, you add more soft. If you want it to look bright, you add more bright. This really helped make the right look for me when it came to the final render. So let's take our luminance. Let's go back in and drop this down. And this is more where I want to be. Okay, so perfect. Let's crank this light down. The other thing I want to do is add a dimension to the light. Right now the light is just as bright over here as it is over here, and that's just not the way lights work. So let's go to fall off and set to inverse square clamped, and just shrink down the fall off a little bit so they fall off. By the time it hits the other side of our object here, hopefully it will fall off. And that helped a lot. We're getting a lot more shadow in here. And I still do want kind of less light over here than on the other side. I want there to be a bright area and a dark area. So even less. How low do I have to get this? That's getting a little better. Let's turn this all the way off and make sure this is working the way we want it to. Oh, there's just too much luminance. So again, we're balancing again. Balance, balance, balance. And I'm going to turn off our multiply altogether to make sure our Chanlum is working correctly. So you can see this dark area is what I'm looking for. That is what I'm trying to get. I want that dark area to exist. Perfect. Okay, so now let's multiply that onto our colors. And that's looking pretty good. It's still a little bit too shadowy. So again, we're tweaking, we're tweaking, we're tweaking. So at what point do you start to say, okay, we're looking good here. Let's bring it into Photoshop and finish it up? I would say somewhere around here. Let's look at the between and see what we're missing. We're missing some shadows. So select some ambient occlusion, I think will help in here. So let's just add some ambient occlusion. I know I want it to be super teeny, and I know I want it to be really minimal. So I'm just going to take as much ambient occlusion out of this as possible. Do a render. And that's helping fill in some of these gaps here. That's helping kind of give that different color. And the other thing I would say is that the pink is a lot more pink here, and it's also the yellow almost makes it outside. You can see these colors are still part of the yellow family, and only the edge is pink. So what do we go from here? We take our plane and we scale this whole thing up. I just want the edge to be the pink spheres. And now we're getting a couple of those nice little weird yellow ones. I might scale this up even a little bit more. And that's looking pretty good. We got our reflections are maybe a little bit too strong. So again, we're really at that point where we're tweaking and tweaking. Now, if all we're doing is making this to look good for us, we could be done. We could play with this for hours. But if we're trying to match something, really look at match it. Like, look at this one sphere and look at this one yellow sphere and see, like, what are the differences. I think we're getting pretty close. I think we're getting pretty close as far as colors, and the rest I think we could pull off in Photoshop. So let's crank up the settings here because you can see it's still a little bit grainy. Let's go to our physical render and set this to a lower number. So a lower number will give you a cleaner render. Let's do a test. That's looking better. And let's do a little bit lower. And we may have to just crank up those samples also inside of our Chanlum. And I think I'm going to learn more about this Chanlum thing and come out with a separate tutorial just on this. So we won't get into all these settings too much, except for I'm sure we need more samples just to clean up some of this. Oh, there it is. Okay, so you can see it's a lot cleaner now. All the grain's gone. But it is taking much longer to render. But that's okay. We only need to render this one more time, and that's with the alpha, so we can bring this into Photoshop. So let's set that up. Let's go to our output, and that's probably too big for what we're going to do with it. So let's go 600, and current frame is fine. Let's go to save alpha channel, and let's render it, and it will render to the picture viewer. Now, while we're rendering the picture viewer, it's a good time to talk about why that took a little bit longer to calculate. And that's because the dynamics calculate in the picture viewer frame by frame by frame to get to frame 6. Even though you've done it already in the viewport, it has to recalculate all your dynamics. So in this case, the dynamics didn't take that long to calculate, so you didn't see a lot of that. But if you ever have a picture viewer and it's just calculating, it's probably redoing all your dynamics up to that point. One thing I didn't do is add a straight alpha, so we have to re-render one more time. All right, and here we go. And let's see, should we look at the cube one before or after we go to Photoshop? Let me show you that scene file while we're here. This is the cube, and you can see there's a lot more stuff to load. There's a lot more particles in here. There's a lot more clones, and because it's kind of a tall render, it's maybe a little hard to see, but I think we're kind of as large as we can for this screen size. And let me just do a quick render, and you can see where I ended up with the cube in here. So same concept, right? We have a bite taken out of it with the boole. We have our lights around it to give it that Chanlum effect. We got the gradient set up, and now the only difference is the plane effector is a cube fall off. Where is that? Where is that one? I think it's this one. So it's a box fall off, excuse me, and now the box is just on the edge, and then it trails off to an orange at the bottom. So there's that difference. And the only other thing I had to do is add this cube right here. And what this cube is it's exactly as big as the bite. So I put a cube right where the bite is, and I set it to be dynamic, and I kept this shape to be automatic. And all that meant was that there were never any particles that intersected with this area. In other words, if there was a particle that wanted to be in this little area, this cube said you can't, because it is a dynamic object that just nothing can penetrate it, right? So that cube either needed to be back inside of the object, or it needed to be exploded out like all these here. So other than that, same concept. I'll say one more thing while we're at this cube concept here, is it was a little bit trickier to figure out how to make sure everything was full. So in other words, remember when we were like, okay, how many clones do we need? Well, in this case, we needed, a lot more. Here's 3,000 clones. And I also had to add a lot more of these little bits to the cloning system to try to fill in all those gaps. So you can see this takes a lot longer to calculate. I hit G, and it's taking a few seconds per frame there just to calculate the dynamics. But it ends up being a really cool render, and I'm sure I'll add the final render of this one in the blog post so you can see it. But this is where we ended up with the cube. So again, same concept. All right. So let's go back to the picture viewer. Let's export this out with our alpha. Let's save as. I'm going to save this as a 16-bit TIFF, and I'm going to send it to here. I'm going to see spheres, and let's go to Photoshop and finish this thing up. All right, so I'm going to go open, and I'm going to go spheres, boom, open. And I got to shrink my Photoshop here. So now we have our sphere object. We can obviously kind of crop this down. We don't need the whole big thing there. And the other thing we could do is go to our channel and command click on our alpha and go back out to layers and just paste this out. So command J, made a new object. And this way we can put this on top of a gradient. So in this case, we have this like green to blue to green gradient. And we can actually just color drop this if we want. If we're not sure what colors those are, we could just come in here and say, let's say that's a green. And let's go flip-flop these. And let's grab I. I is the color picker. And we're going to grab that one. And now let's make a gradient out of these two colors. Here's the gradient tab. Here, let's set our opacity all the way up. Let's make a new layer in Photoshop. And let's go to our gradient and just drag one out. So now you can see we have this kind of green to blue. This is exactly the opposite of what we need. So we can either reverse this or reverse them here, but I could just reverse and do like, a kind of a bluish to green kind of thing. And that is close, right? So we still have a lot to do. You can see there's blurriness here. We could render with depth of field, which I've set up in other tutorials. We don't have to set up here, but just make this your focus point. Set up your lens. And drop your f-stop until you get this much blurriness and render that out. You can see some other tutorials where I do that. Excuse me. But now what? Well, now we can add a curves specifically just to our overall object or our main object. The way we do that is we hold Alt or Option down and we click the curves on top of it. So now the curves only affect this thing and not the whole object. All right, so I'm going to blow this back up. I want it to be a little bit brighter, and I want the darker stuff to be a little bit darker. All right, and that's looking good. The other thing I want to do is maybe shrink this down. So there we go. And I also want to paint a little bit more darkness over here. I like how dark this is over here, but this just didn't get dark enough for me. Now, I could sit and tweak it in Cinema and re-render and re-render and re-render, but why do that when I could just select this object and duplicate it, right? So I don't even need it selected. I just need it selected in our layers. We hit Command J, we make a new layer, and now on this one, we can darken this. Now for this, I could use the I think it's Burn tool. Burn tool will darken things. Dodge tool will brighten things. So I could just grab, say, take the midtones and just kind of paint in there. Then this is too much. Let's drop our exposure down. We could just paint a little bit of darkness. Now on top of that, we could raise our overall brightness to kind of compensate for that. Now it's all about the balance of all these things. Another thing I could do is add a gradient. So in this case, I want a black and white gradient. I just want the opposite of that again. Here we go. And I'm going to overlay this one. This is going to give like kind of a hotter color boost in the middle and just kind of change some of the colors on the outside. And I'm just changing the opacity down. I don't want this full opacity. I just want a little bit of an effect. You can see it kind of makes all this stuff real nice and sharp inside of here. The next thing I'll do is duplicate this layer and multiply it. And this way it just kind of gives a vignette over the colors. And I want my curve overall to jump on top of all of this. So one last curve. Let's go to here. Let's go to curves. And we could brighten this and kind of pull up some of those colors in the background and start to get that. So we're getting pretty close. It's a little hot here. Now we could change that by kind of dumbing this down a little bit. But really, it's just pretty bright. It might need a re-render to come back in and tone down some of these colors. But I think overall, it might be this right here. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Darken up the edge a little bit more. And that's pretty close. So not bad. We can always spend more time and like getting more of this ambient occlusion in here. You can see it's a little bit darker in here. In fact, why don't we do that? We can come into this one. Remember when we darken the shadow? We can come in here and we could use that dodge again, or is this burn? I always get them confused. burn, and we could say shadows and just add more shadows in there. You can see the difference. So here's with more shadows, here's without. We may have to go into the midtones and pull those back a little bit too to kind of pull some of that yellow out of there. So this is already looking better. See all those shadows we just added? We just painted those in with the burn tool. So that's really powerful. Again, rather than sit in Cinema and tweak our settings 100 times to get to this, we could just try to paint that. So not bad.
Thanks again for watching, everybody. And hey, if you're new here, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel where we come out with new tutorials just like this every week. As always, I just wanted to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial really soon. Bye, everybody. Wait, guys, this is really important. Just ran out of paper towels. You know what we called these in my family? Doot-de-doos. You know why? Because every time you get one, you do this. Doot-de-doo! Da-da-da!